What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. If you're new around here, my name's Uncle Reddit, and this is r/pro revenge. This is going to be a little bit of a longer one. Lighting sucks as usual, but that's alright. We don't need light or dark for telling stories, so let's get to it. You want to have your cake and eat it too? Two-timing baby daddy gets his just desserts. For context, years ago, I, 20 female, and the father of my first two children, 26 male, were going through a rough time in our relationship. He was working night shift as a janitor in a nursing home while I was going to college for nursing during the day. We had a 1-year-old, and I had just given birth to our son 3 months earlier. There was a woman that he worked with that I had gotten to know pretty well when I would bring him his lunches. We were friends, or so I thought. He was supposed to be waxing the floors at night when no one was up and about.
Grin, grin, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, say no more.
Just so happened my cousin ran into him and her having drinks at a local bar on one of the nights that he was supposed to be working. Cue massive fight. Got off early. Just friends. Blah, blah, blah. Won't happen again. About a month later comes the talk. We've been fighting too much. Let's keep this amicable for the kids and stay friends. Mind you, the house was mine. I paid the bills with grants and scholarships I earned through school. The car he drove was mine too. I would be nice and allow him to stay till he got something figured out. Still take my car to work. I still fed him. All that good nonsense. Then he starts being loving and we continue a physical relationship. I happen to be feeding our son one morning while he still sleeps. And his phone goes off. I know. Don't look for it if you don't want to know, right? Turns out he's been carrying on a relationship with the other woman the whole time he's been with me. It would have been fine if that's what he wanted, if he wasn't doing the same with me at the same time. Cue petty revenge. I crawled back into bed with him, naked, and he snuggled up like he always does. I took pictures from his phone, nice and graphic ones. I sent them to her from his phone, along with a very nicely, in my opinion, worded message explaining everything that he had been up to and into. Then I got dressed to the wonderful pings from his phone and continued about my day, packing his things. He woke a few hours later and went for his phone first thing. I happened to come into the room as he's trying to call her, and when he turns to look at me, I can see all the blood rush from his face. He can't even mount a defense as I tell him all about the conversation me and his new girlfriend have had, along with some photos. All his things are now out on the porch boxed up. I tell him he no longer lives in my house and to leave. He starts to blubber about, where will he go? So I told him that he'd better call his girlfriend to come pick him up and live with her because he sure as hell isn't using my vehicle anymore, and that sounds like his problem, and I shut the door on him. I had been with this man-child for 6 years, given my body, heart, and sanity to this man. Hell, I was even willing to still let him live there, not paying bills, eat there, and drive my car for him to be sleeping with both of us at the same time. Was it petty? Hell yeah, but it was deserved. I'm not a very forgiving person. If my partner, husband, wife, whatever, cheats on me, and I know about it, there ain't no getting lovey. There ain't no sleeping in the same bed. You ain't gonna drive my car. If the house is all in my name, you ain't living in my house. I'll do what needs to be done for the kids, but as far as the relationship, that's over. Yeah. I think OP had a little bit of rose-colored glasses on thinking that maybe things could turn around, but, yeah, I mean, once a cheater, always a cheater, honestly. I don't like liars. This happened 5+ years ago, and it's still one of my proudest moments. I was dating this guy, Dan, going through a custody battle with his ex-girlfriend over their toddler. We worked at the same bar with this girl named Billie Jean. Billie Jean was an old friend of Dan and had worked with him before. She also had previously worked with the mother of Dan's child, Rachel, and everyone was seemingly friends and remaining civil, or so I thought. Billie Jean had secretly taken sides and wrote a terrible affidavit lying about Dan. Dan somehow got a copy of it. I don't remember how the court process went. As I was reading it, I kept getting more and more irate. I hate liars, and one thing I really feel that crosses a boundary is using a child for leverage to hurt the other parent. Billie Jean was knowingly lying under oath and siding with Rachel to prevent Dan from parenting his kid, and he was by no means a bad dad. Well, Billie Jean had enemies that I worked with, and had easy access to contact. These enemies had sold Billie Jean a car that she wasn't paying them for. I didn't necessarily like the people who owned the car, but the enemy of my enemy is my friend. I called them up and told them I came in peace. I asked if they had Billie Jean's address to get back their car. They did not. I passed off Billie Jean's info and waited for her to call me. Now I was one of 2 people who could have ratted out the location of the car, and when Billie Jean called me to tell me her car got repoed, she said she had no idea who could have done it. It would have either been me or her ex Robbie. I tell her casually, I don't think it was Robbie, and I swear up and down. She responded with, well, who would have done it then? I held back laughter and finished the conversation with half-assed, oh, I don't know, that's so weird type comments until she hung up. Dan was next to me in the car, snickering. Dan won shared custody of his child, and Billie Jean lost her bar job because she didn't have transportation to work an hour away. To this day, I wonder if she ever pieced together that it was me. I don't like liars. Yeah, I don't like liars either, but I will say this, playing devil's advocate. You didn't get into detail as far as what the affidavit said and everything like that, but I will say, you got to be real careful because sometimes what you think are lies or what you think you know is really skewed because you're looking at things from a different angle. We don't always have all the information, so she could have been right. I don't know. Like I said, you didn't give details, but I've seen it happen before where somebody swore somebody else was lying simply because they didn't like them or they liked the person that was being supposedly lied against better or, you know, I don't get into those games because if I don't know something, I don't know something. But, hey, sounds like she was kind of a rat anyway, so whatever. Mom takes down the HOA from the inside. My neighborhood does not have a homeowners association, at least not anymore. When my parents first moved in, my older sibling, maybe 2 years old, and with me as a little glowworm, there was an HOA. They took money from the neighborhood in exchange for their services. At first, and for quite a while, my parents just kind of shrugged it off. The HOA shoveled the snow off the streets in winter and dealt with trash collection, so they were doing something worthwhile, right? Ha, no, the city controlled the snowplows and the garbage trucks, not the HOA. But still, there was the illusion of effort. And besides, one summer they decided to contract a company to plant new trees all over the neighborhood. The fact that the company was owned by the son of the head of the HOA was totally coincidental. The trees were the beginning of the end for the HOA. Why? Well, my grandma on my dad's side was visiting when they came around to plant the trees. My grandma, who is a certified master gardener. And so she stared through the windows of our house as the guys planting the trees just dropped the saplings on the grass, still with their roots inside the bag they came in. No holes dug, no holes cut, just a bagged sapling lying on the grass like a pathetic, sad stick. The saplings laid there all night. No one came back to actually do their job and plant them. My master gardener grandma mentioned offhand that those saplings were going to die unless they got in the soil. And something clicked in my mom's head. She was paying the HOA money, actual money every month, while both she and my dad worked, taking care of 2 very little kids, sending us to daycare and preschool and arranging babysitters and feeding us, and the homeowners association was just going to pull this half-ass BS instead of do what she's paying them for? No effing way. So she showed up to the head of the HOA's house and basically demanded that the trees get planted properly, like she's apparently paying for them to. The head of the HOA, so excited for someone actually caring about the neighborhood, made their second mistake. They asked if Mom wanted to join the HOA. She agreed. The trees were planted, but most didn't make it. My grandma was right. First things first, my mom showed up to the next HOA meeting. There were like 5 people there. No wonder they asked Mom to join. They desperately needed the people. So Mom looked at this collection of white people, herself included, who weren't even paying money to the HOA like the rest of the neighborhood. All the contractors the HOA called in were close relatives of other HOA members and weren't paid by the HOA. After all, they're family. So my mom started digging. She spent pretty much a full summer taking down the HOA before she had to go back to teaching in the fall. With me carted along after her and my sibling old enough to be in school or daycare, she dug through the years of paperwork detailing the HOA's financial situation. And she found something extremely enlightening. The HOA didn't actually do anything. Well, they didn't do anything to benefit the community. Everything they claimed to do was either covered by the individual homeowner or by the city itself. So they were collecting money from all the neighborhood residents under false pretenses. And actually, they weren't even supposed to be in our neighborhood. Their association zone was a whole different neighborhood. So what is a working mother of 2 small children to do while her husband is off at work and she's off for the summer? She goes door to door with pamphlets. Me and my sibling in a stroller as she weaves her way through the neighborhood blocks. Pamphlets explaining the situation and how to stop paying for services you'll never get. Pamphlets that are, of course, written in both English and Spanish to account for the high amount of Latino and Hispanic people in our neighborhood. And naturally, she got a lawyer. And an accountant. It put a major dent in her pocket, but if it meant the entire neighborhood wasn't exploited for money each month, it was worth every penny. Another HOA member helped her sift through the documents and data and pass out pamphlets and encouraged people to show up to meetings. but had to back out because of work-related reasons. My mom rolled up to the courthouse flanked by the lawyer and accountant, her kids safe at home with her husband, and had more than enough evidence to get the Homeowners Association the F out of her neighborhood, expose the fraudsters for the frauds they were, and make sure that no HOA would ever push their luck in our neighborhood. It's been almost 19 years and no one's even tried making another homeowners association in our neighborhood. Good for your mom. Man, she sounds like she's an attorney. And a bulldog of an attorney at that. Yeah, right is right. You know, one more reason to hate HOAs. I will never, ever, and I don't care, I will never live under the thumb of an HOA. Ever. I don't care if I'm living in a cardboard box first. Nobody's going to tell me what I can and can't do with my property. Now, are there city, county, and state ordinances that you got to follow? Yes. You know, I don't want to be that much of an outlaw, honestly. But at the same time, as long as I work within those constraints, screw somebody else with their blue hair and their, little garden parties and whatever telling me what I can and can't do on my property. People suck. Bag of nails. I'm a dryliner, which means I do a lot of moving around for my trade, as most of the work I do is towards the end of most projects. This means that I spend a lot of my time renting flats and houses for only short periods, usually about 6 months at a time. This has meant that I have had to deal with a lot of landlords over the years, both good and bad. When it comes to the bad landlords, I will normally just walk away and get on with moving to the next job and take the loss of my deposit and never use them again if I'm working in that area in the future. But this particular landlord got my back up so badly, I was not just going to walk away. I had managed to get myself onto a big job in London working on the new Wembley Stadium, so decided I would look for a house to rent rather than a flat, as I know I was going to be working on it for a while, and found a reasonably priced, for London, house to rent from a private landlord in a local newspaper. I gave him a call and meet with him later that day. He seemed okay. Went to view the house, paid him the deposit, cash, and moved in that weekend. I ended up staying in the house for nearly a year with no problems. Always had the rent paid into his bank account on time and fixed any small problems that might crop up with the house myself without bothering him. Up to the time when it came to moving out, only ever spoke to him twice on the phone after there was an issue with the heating that I was unable to fix myself, and he sent an engineer around the next day to fix the boiler. Came the time that the job was finishing, I went round to the pawn shop that he owned to give him notice that I would be moving out the following month, and to let him know that I was happy for him to come around to inspect the house before I moved out, so that I could get my deposit back from him when I returned the keys. He never came around while I was in to inspect the house, and so I assumed that he had come around and let himself in while I was at work, as I had told him that I had no issue with him doing that if need be. So on the day I moved out, I went around to the shop and handed him his keys back and asked for my deposit. His response was, "What deposit?" "The month's rent that I gave you in advance of moving in as a security deposit," I replied. He then told me he was keeping that to cover the cost of repairing damages caused while I was living in the property. I responded with, "What damages?" With the bits of work and decorating I had done on the house, it was in a better state now than when I had moved into it. His response was to step forward and get right up into my face and say, "You're not getting it back, so F off." And then he gave me a shove, which needed me to take 3 steps back to avoid falling on my arse. Now I'm what you would class as average size and build, and this landlord had a good 4 inches on me height-wise, and obviously spent some time down the gym, and the wise move would be to back away and cut my losses. Now before I was a builder, I was a member of the British Army in a regiment called the Royal Green Jackets, and they had trained us that the best way to proceed when confronted with aggression is to meet it swiftly and with much more violent aggression. So without even thinking about it, I started to move forward with the full intention of dropping this twat quickly and painfully. After the first step, though, a thought popped into my head like a bolt from the blue. So I stopped and took a moment to examine the idea for a few different angles and said, "Okay, bye," to my now ex-landlord and walked out of his shop. What the landlord didn't know was that I had had a spare back door key cut when I lived in the house, which I had stashed in my van in case I ever lost the keys so I could still get back in. So later that evening, I let myself back in and decided to stop for one last night before leaving in the morning for my next job, which was in Scotland. I spent the last night in the house carefully removing every bit of wood in there. I took down doors, removed skirting boards, banisters, architrave, and floorboards, being extremely careful not to damage anything. I also completely dismantled all the kitchen units, took up the wood flooring and carpets. I then left everything in nice neat piles in each room. I got in my van the next morning and was preparing to start my drive when I decided I wanted to rub a little more salt into my ex-landlord's wounds. So I stopped at his shop on the way out of London, got a spare hammer, screwdriver, bag of nails, and a box of wood screws out of the back of my van and went into the shop. My ex-landlord was not there, probably for the best, so I left the tools with his confused-looking assistant and told her to tell her boss, "You'll be needing these," and left for my drive north. I had my phone switched off while driving, and a few hours later, while I was having a bite to eat in a service station up by Nottingham, I decided to switch it back on and was greeted by a string of text messages and some very colorful voice messages, which left me chuckling to myself. Edit. I did reply to one of the texts he sent me. The text was, "Do you think you're effing funny leaving me nails and screws?" I responded, "Yes." Absolutely brilliant, OP. I think that was one of the best revenges I've read in a while. Are you going to take time off of work, especially if you have a really good paying job, to go to court for this fool for 1 month's security? Or are you going to spend a few hours making his life miserable, and it'll be more than a few hours for him to put it all back, I'm sure, or it'll cost him money for somebody else to do it. Perfect. When he walks in, he's got all he needs. He's just got to put it back together. Outstanding. Well, hey guys, I hope you enjoyed these stories, and if you did, would you consider doing me a favor? Maybe click like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We're trying to get over the 1,000 subscriber mark. And click that little bell icon so you don't miss the fat guy with the beard telling you stories. See ya!